1. So this story takes place about 3 years ago when I was doing an internship alongside 2 of my friends from the same class. So to give some basic details, me and my 2 friends got an internship at a large school under their IT department. Fix IT-related problems all over the school and fix problems for students, teachers, guests, etc. Now the job was okay, nothing to write home about, but the pay was $5 a day to make up for gas expenditures. So imagine working from 8 to 5, often having to finish up stretching that from 8 to 6 for $25 a week for 4 months. So essentially slave labor in exchange for fulfilling a school requirement. When we started, we met our boss in our shared office. We'll call him Ron. He seemed alright, but not much of a talker. Someone you could tell a joke, and he'd stare at you not sure how to react. So the first week went alright. He was supposed to have us tag along and show us the ropes. But he more or less just sent us out to do shit. Pretty crappy to do to a bunch of barely adult lads just starting their education, but regardless, we made it work. I more or less did Ron's job and told my friends what to do and how to do it, splitting up the job, saying who did what, etc. Ron's initial inaction became worse though. When he arrived, he took a long coffee break 5 minutes after arriving, usually from 20 minutes to an hour, despite there being a coffee machine right outside our office. He would come back to do close to nothing, and take his lunch break at 11, ranging from 2 to 4 hours, and when he came back, he would take at least 2 more coffee breaks. To boil it down, on a good day he would work 5 to 6 hours of his 9-hour contract. On a bad day, maybe 3 to 4 hours. After about 3 months of this, we were all tired of this bull, so we worked 4 extra hours on average a week. Didn't learn shit and barely had time for our own lunch breaks, which we usually ended up taking a quick bite in between phone calls or a job. So I started following the exact details of the contract instead. Several smoke breaks, 1-hour lunch break, etc., and got permission from the boss to take our breaks together. Since we didn't have time to meet any co-workers as such, it'd be uncomfortable to take lunch breaks alone. It's worth noting Ron drove home during his lunch breaks, hence them being so long, and he was the main contact if the office phones were not answered, but he rarely answered his phone, it was usually off. So whenever Ron went on his break, we waited exactly 1 hour, his lunchtime, before going off on our break, and then we extended our break for 2 hours, usually arriving back at the office before Ron had come back. Well, we carried this on for several weeks. Every time work had piled up, there were people waiting in front of the office, the phones had a dozen missed calls. One day, we were on our break and Ron called saying his work phone was full of missed calls, obviously panicking, telling us to go to the office. Well, I politely informed him I just started my break, and he is supposed to be at the office himself given his lunch break is long over. Right, Ron? Before saying that, I'd see him in 50 minutes when our break is over. So we get back there, and find the director talking loudly at him, and him deflecting, saying there must have been a schedule mix-up, etc. Well, we think it ended there. Ron observes the rules for a few days before falling into his old behavior, and at that point our time is up. We said our goodbyes and go to the director to get our internship results. He says we all did great, and he heard good things about us, but our attendance had not been good for the past 3 weeks, so he couldn't give us the full grade. So at that point I stop him and tell him the entire story about Ron and his breaks, and that we followed the rules to the letter. I also show him our work schedule, which is filled in, and shows we were not skipping much of anything. Well, he pretty much flips and basically thanks us for keeping the entire IT operation running, and that he will have a word with Ron, and that he will change our grades back. After that, I didn't hear anything, so I decided to message an ex-co-worker from the internship to see what happened. Apparently Ron got berated, told to fix his act, and slipped back into his old behavior and got fired. 2. So to begin this tale, it was a Saturday night, getting close to midnight in the Rocky Mountain State. I had received a trip request from a club downtown from a Christina. At this point, Uber gave very little info to us drivers about the ride we were about to get. Just the name of the passenger and passenger rating. No indication on how far or what direction even the passenger was going. So when I arrived to the club, 3 college girls pile into the car. "Are you Christina?" Kathy answers.
"Yeah, this is Christina."
"Okay. Christina, what's your driver's name?" The girls pretend not to hear me as I am asking for confirmation that I am in fact their driver. Ladies, who is your driver?
You are.
I laugh along, putting on my customer service face. I may be, but we'll still have to confirm that we have the right people. I was very adamant about doing this after someone tried to steal another person's Uber one night.
Like I said, your phone says this is Christina.
This Kathy sounds to me like the epitome of an entitled witch. I make no move to leave, and after much grumbling, Christina finally confirms that I am who I am.
You're OP. If you're done wasting time, let's go.
Yep, I'm OP. Sorry about the trouble. I have had people try to steal another person's Uber in the past. This gets me no response, and I do all I can to avoid visibly sighing in despair. I begin the ride, and this is where I normally would confirm the address, but before I can even read it.
Give me your aux cable. We need good music.
Crank Rihanna, Kathy.
All three girls scream. Okay, here you go. Sorry it's not long. I hand the cord to Kathy, which barely reaches beyond the front seats.
Wow, cheap.
This was said quietly, but in my tiny car everything can be heard. It honestly hit harder than expected, though, because I am a prideful person when it comes to my work.
Crank the music.
And she gets the music playing. I'm about to comply when I actually read the address. It was 123 Dad's house, Wichita, Kansas. Obviously, I don't know the actual address. Hey, just to confirm, you need to go to 123 Dad's house, Wichita, Kansas. The girls are laughing and promptly ignoring me as I drive slowly along. Excuse me, I need to confirm the address really quick.
Yeah, it's right, just fucking drive.
Turn the music up and go.
At this point, I just shut up and turn the music and start driving with purpose. I ignored most of what they said in the back seat at this point. I knew that they didn't want to go to Kansas, they had no luggage, and I picked them up from a club. But they told me to drive and refused to listen, so I was going to get as much out of this trip as I could before they would notice that we were driving east at a rapid pace. It was about 40 minutes later that the back seat had quieted down.
Guys, where's he taking us?
Says Sarah. I start to slow down and turn the music down a touch. We are no longer in a city, but in the plains with basically only the stars as light. We could still see the city behind us in the distance.
Where are we?
You could hear the confusion in her voice.
Where's he taking us?
123 Dad's house, Wichita, Kansas is the address you put in, and the one I said at the start of the ride.
That's my dad's house, that's not mine. Turn around.
Yes, ma'am. I turn around more aggressively than necessary. Where to? Kathy explodes in a stream of insults, drowning out anything else in the car. Christina, what address am I taking you to? Kathy quiets down, glaring at me, allowing Christina to tell me they are at the college outside of downtown. Let's get y'all there, I say, and then crank the music again and start driving. The whole time I am driving, I am in a panic because I just know that they are going to try and contest this fare and probably try to get me suspended from the app. Nothing really eventful happens while I'm driving. These girls are pretty quiet. But I can hear them say small comments about reporting this and how it was messed up. As we approached the college campus, I began to try to cover my ass, so I just want to say I'm sorry about this experience, y'all. It really sucks when there is a miscommunication on this level. I will say, though, that I will be saving my dashcam footage from tonight in case there is trouble with Uber over the fare, since it's a strange one. I pause to see if they have anything to say about my dashcam bluff, but they say nothing. I come to a stop close to the dorm area of the college. I hope y'all have a great night now, and good luck with your studies. They all get out of the car without a word and slam the doors. I pull away and rate Christina with a single star and give the reason as wrong address entered in and rude. The ride would have been close to a minimum fare if they would have put the right address in, but it turned into a $70 trip. Christina never gave me a low rating from what I know, but those are the ones we drivers actually hear about. I now know that I could have done a lot different to avoid this situation, but at the time, I was still fairly new, and it took a bit for me to adjust to the work. If you hear this, I am open to all criticisms. Just don't be a dick. 3. In the senior year of high school, I was the unofficial percussion section leader in our school's wind ensemble. I say unofficial because while I only played mallet instruments, vibraphone, marimba, glockenspiel, etc., I had the most musical experience in the group. For reference, I'm currently taking a bachelor's in music at university, whereas the other 3 students were mostly taking the class for arts credits. That's the most bragging I'll do from here on out, I swear. Every semester our band director had us do scale tests, where we would memorize all 12 major scales, and he'd randomly select 2 of us to play. Since I was on mallets, band director had me teach the rest of the section the scales. Now, if you've ever played percussion in a large ensemble, especially in a high school one, you know that you can get ignored a bit. The band director, an amazing man mind you, focused on teaching all the wind players we had no strings, R.I.P., who could read notes how to play the scales. He trusted me to show the drummers every note on the keyboards because they could read rhythms but not so much on pitches, so that they would be able to pass the tests. Every day I would patiently show the 3 of them how to play the scale of the week. And for the most part it paid off. The most experienced guy could somewhat read notes, and he practiced really hard to memorize the scales, which he had learned the previous year but forgotten. Understandable. Have a nice day. The other 2, a boy and a girl, were newer and they were a bit slower, but they still made an effort to learn, the 8, 7 if you want to get technical, notes each week. The girl was difficult. Whenever I'd offer her advice or correct her on the notes, she'd dismiss me and say something along the lines of, "I've got this," while still screwing up and making the same mistake. I'm no teacher, but I feel like I was doing my best to be gentle, coming by when I saw her struggling and backing off when I got the signal to do so. One day, during scales practice, I'm going around and checking up on our group, since I know the scales already, duh, when I approach the new girl and try to help. To her credit, I might have said something a little nitpicky, like that the notes should be equal rhythmic length, but that didn't excuse what followed. She looked up from the keys and said in the most bratty voice, "You know what, OP? Why don't you just leave me alone and worry about yourself?" Okay. From then on, I heeded her request. Every morning thereafter, I would only help the 2 guys with their scales. When we would get a new scale, I would only show these 2 what notes they would need to learn, and let Ms. Fuck Off look them up herself. Band director barely paid mind to our section during scale practice, so he didn't notice her struggling. She must have had enough false confidence or didn't care, because to my knowledge she never reached out to anyone for help. When scales tests came, band director had us all go one at a time. I had no troubles. This shit is my second language. Veteran guy plays the scales near perfectly, having practiced so hard. I was really proud of him. Newer guy made a few mistakes, but did well enough to pass. You did good, buddy. Ice Queen walks over to the marimba, and the bitch will not look up from the keys to meet the band director's eyes. He picks the scale for her to play. She takes a full 9 seconds, I counted, to find the starting note, and proceeds to play the most creative interpretation of a single octave E major scale I've ever heard. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I'm pretty sure it was one with a couple of sharps. It was almost like she was trying to write a 12-tone row on the spot. Band director gives an uncomfortable smile and picks the next scale. Repeat a similar modal mess to the first one. Needless to say, the band director failed her. Did I forget to mention that the scale test was worth 50% of our grade? 4. The year is 2018. Shotgun by George Ezra is at the top of the charts for some reason. The oldest library in Germany, dating to 2 AD, is unearthed, revealing 20,000 scrolls. And at a small IT company on the coast, I receive an angry email. It is from the CEO of an import-export company, a man with 2 faces. Let's call him Scott. That's a good, strong, generic arsehole's name. On the other hand, while everything is going well, Scott is jovial and pleasant to work with, if you can call empty platitudes pleasant. However, when he doesn't get his way, the man is an infant throwing a tantrum like his mother took the tit away. Scott is an ideas man who likes to delegate, which is good for a CEO. Scott also likes to micromanage and is an expert on how things should work, not how they do work, which is less good for a CEO. Character development done. Let us take a bite of this rancid sandwich and return to the email. It's an odd thing. It starts by eloquently threatening that Scott will find another IT provider if we can't fix his spam issue. I tell my boss, who just shrugs. Shock and awe, they're shit with paying their bills, and they never follow up on the things they ask us to quote. So he tells me to handle it however I like, and not feel bad if they move on. Scott is getting a lot of spam. This has been an ongoing problem. Not solved with the spam filtering we set up for his company. The reason? Scott scours the web looking for the cheapest products to get his sales team to flip, and signs up to a lot of newsletters from reputable senders, so his spam, not really spam, hence why the filter doesn't catch it like it does with 3,000 plus other emails that hit his company daily. For a while now I've penciled myself in to manually block senders in Outlook for him, but this sends him to his junk folder, and he doesn't like looking at it. Sitting there, 10,000 unread messages staring at him accusingly like so many starving orphans at his doorstep. And no, I'm not allowed to set it to automatically delete things in junk. What if there's something important? I've told him he really needs to unsubscribe from things and not subscribe to more. But he's got a better solution, tacked onto the bottom of the mail. He wants us to introduce an email approval system. No emails to come to the company without directly being on an approved list. For those who have actually studied the art of technomancy in the beige towers, that's 3 words strung together that don't actually mean much. My eye twitches. I buy into it for a day. It must exist and I haven't heard of it. I search the web and come across an old system from the early 90s that everybody hated, that would block all mail until the person sending something replies to an automatic message confirming they're human. It was discontinued before Backstreet was back. I call Scott and ask him for an example of this nebulous tech he wants.
Oh, it's something that my friend who works for Globicide Mining Industries has. Sure, I can ask him what it's called.
Days pass. Another angry email asking where we were at with this project. I tell him I was waiting for him to get back to me with the program's name. His friend said he didn't know the program's name. It was a lie, Scott has no friends. I've spent too much time on this. My eye twitches. I'm done trying to be helpful. What the man wants is a secretary, not an IT system. I scan his original email's requirements. Block all email coming in unless approved, eh? Oh my man, have I got you covered. The spam filter we had set up for him can absolutely be set to block all mail. That's his 100 plus daily digest of mailing lists, in addition to the 3,000 plus spam messages it blocks before legitimate mail for all employees. As for the approval list, Scott never mentioned who would be doing the approving. It certainly wasn't going to be us. So I made him an admin account on the filter, wrote up a guide on how to navigate it and approve addresses, and handed it over. I told him I'd turn the block on once he had a chance to familiarize himself with the process and ask any questions. True malice would have been to turn this thing on. Never heard back. Never disputed the bill. Still unaccountably our client. 5. The timeline for this tale is Christmas 1988. I used to have a music production studio based out of a big studio rehearsal complex in South London, and I had been working for 3 days on recording and producing some backup tapes for a client, who also happened to be an old friend. The last day we spent working on the mixdowns, and at about 9:30 p.m, we decided to take a timeout and go to the local pub for some refreshment, rest our ears, and generally chew over what we'd done. While we were blowing the froth off a couple, my old friend Alex and his girlfriend turned up. We all knew each other, so decided to carry on until closing time. Since it was getting late, I suggested we all go back to the studio, listen to the mixes we'd done, and call it a day. As we were walking down the corridor, we came across the rehearsal studio's manager, a person of staggering arrogance and ineptitude, and a frequent thorn in my side, who was restocking the beer machine in the green room. I told him that we were just going downstairs to my studio to listen to what we'd been doing and wrap things up. I also told him not to lock up before checking in with me first. So we all settled down and listened to the first track. At the end, Alex had to go to the loo, so he went off in search of relief while we carried on. The second track had barely started playing when he came back in and said that all the lights were off upstairs, and furthermore, the security doors in the upper corridor were all locked. WTF? Thinking he was winding me up, I went up to investigate. And sure enough, all the lights were off, and the security doors closed up tighter than an anxious sphincter, attempting to rein in the purgative effects of a thermonuclear-grade vindaloo. Going back into the studio, I tried to call the studio owner, but got no joy. So we sat there for a while, trying to work out what on earth to do. Alex in particular was concerned, as he was due to fly off to the Middle East first thing in the morning to shoot a commercial. Eventually I decided the only hope was to call the fire brigade and get them to come rescue us. 20 minutes passed, no fire brigade. 30 minutes, still no joy, but this time I had lost my patience, so grabbing my toolbox I went upstairs to the fire exit, which had been chained up, and proceeded to dismantle the entire emergency panic bar exit system from the inside. I eventually managed to get it open, only to be confronted by a big burly fireman about to lay into the door with a large fire axe. Fortunately, I managed to avoid being sliced in two by the simple expedient of stepping rapidly to one side. The rest of the firemen entered and checked out the rest of the building while I regaled the lead officer with our tale of woe, much to his evident amusement. Despite his amusement, he was absolutely furious with this clear violation of basic fire safety principles. And he told me he'd be back first thing in the morning to give the owners a right earful, because there was a strong case for prosecution over the incident. As you might imagine, I was not best pleased with the entire farrago, so the next day around noon I stormed into the main studio's office, thundercloud in tow and breathing fire, ironic really, and in front of the studio owner and his wife, proceeded to lay down some serious invective upon the head of the hapless studio manager, calling into question his dubious parentage, and threatening to attach his gonads to the output terminals of the largest Class A power amplifier I could find, if there was ever a repeat of the entire sorry debacle. The studio owner was none too pleased either, a massive understatement, having been read the riot act by the fire brigade. He was also furious that in order to deal with the huge legal fallout from the incident, he'd had to cancel the flight he'd booked to the States, which meant that he and his wife weren't going to be able to visit their family until the new year. The flight the studio owner and his wife was booked on, but had to cancel, was Pan Am 103. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 32. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, a slightly embarrassing moment there. I got an email from someone on Reddit, and saying, the video was good, but I don't see my story in there. Then I realized I'd already contacted the people for the video. I'd already sent the people the messages. Then I've been thinking, okay, I've got some emails to send. And I've looked at that one, I've thought, oh, I've got a bunch of emails there. I've obviously not contacted the people for the recent, it was the Entitled Parents, the Impractical Parents of Parents video. I've obviously not contacted those people yet. So I've then sent just, email, the five messages, not realizing I just sent emails for this week's video to the people who are going to be in the video that goes up on the 15th, which might be actually a little after you guys hear this one. So that was awkward. So I had to scramble to find who had accidentally emailed and apologise and correct them. Well. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.